History Month. This is a month that we certainly have an opportunity to celebrate. But today we're going to celebrate International Women's Day. This year, United Nations International Women's Day theme is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in the COVID-19 World. And it will celebrate the tremendous efforts by women and girls shaping a more equitable future and inclusive world. We want you to now unite with the women of the world as we see who the leadership is around the world on this International Women's Day.
I speak in the voice of Vice President Kamala Harris. I am the first female, first Black, and first Asian American Vice President of the United States. My mother used to tell me, I may be the first to do many things, but make certain, Kamala, you are not the last. I want to create a path for girls who will come after me, knowing that this is a country of possibilities. We cannot let up the fight for equality, fairness, and justice. Anyone who claims to be a leader must speak like a leader, demanding integrity and truth. Do not let anyone tell you who you are.
I speak in the voice of Hillary Clinton. When women participate in politics, it ripples out to the entire country. Women are the world's most underused resource. When running for United States president, millions of people from every corner of the country said with one voice that we believe the American dream is big enough for all of us, for people of all races and religions, for women and men, for immigrants, the LGBT people, and people with disabilities. It is our responsibility to keep doing our part to build that better, stronger, fairer, equitable America we seek. When you get knocked down, get back up and don't listen to anyone who says you can't or shouldn't. Every woman has the right to reach her potential.
I speak in the voice of Shirley Chisholm. In 1972, I became the first African-American woman to run for President of the United States. When announcing my bid, I stated that I am not the candidate of Black Americans, although I am Black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement, although I am a woman and equally proud of that. I am the candidate of the people, and my presence before you now symbolizes a new era in American political history. I know laws will not eliminate prejudice from the hearts of human beings, but there is no reason to allow prejudice to continue to be enshrined in our laws to perpetuate injustice. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair.
Okay.
And what comes to my mind is,
Hey, good afternoon. I am representing Gulsum Kav of Turkey. And she's a very important leader in not only her country, but for all women. She has been associated with eradicating femicide, which is the international killing of a woman or a girl, in particular by a man on account of her gender only. Working as a family doctor in Istanbul, she saw firsthand how Turkish women hid the violence they experienced at the hands of men for fear of retribution or death. And she knew she had to work to prevent violence, not just treat it after the fact. In 2010, Kav, along with her other activists, created the We Will Stop Feminist platform to monitor trials. Laws against femicide are often not implemented in Turkey, and men are given reduced sentences, and create resources for survivors of violence and maintain a database of women who've been murdered. Demand for support has grown significantly throughout the pandemic, but Kav fights on, even as the Turkish government discusses removing protections for victims and their families. While women keep being murdered, she has no other choice. Her most notable achievement, she says, is helping to lead the ongoing protest movement in 2020 that so far has stopped the conservative Turkish government from withdrawing from the Istanbul Convention, a European treaty that aims to prevent violence against women. I'm sorry.
It is interesting to hear the voices of women in leadership, not only in our own country, but certainly around the world. And today, you who are present at this International Women's Day, we are inviting you to say to us, who in your life empowered you to be the woman that you are today? When I thought about that last night, I thought about being raised on a farm and until I was 13 years old, and there was not such a thing as gender rules. You learn to drive a tractor, you learn to feed the calves, you learn to take care of cows, and you learn to plant a garden. And I remember fondly my father saying to me as we were sitting around our dinner table, please never put yourself in a position that you'll be dependent on a man. You can do anything a man can do. And my mother chimed in and said, and Sharon, you can do one thing more than a man could do. And if he could do it, there would only be one child born per family. And all that time I was growing up, I was told, make certain you get your education beyond high school. That was certainly their priority. And I'm grateful to my mom and dad today for their values.
that is my story. I grew up on a farm, and certainly my parents told me, you can do anything you want, just try hard enough.
Both your mom and dad, Dorothy, right?
Right.
And I know Bee has a story to tell because she's told it to me. Bee, do you want to tell us your story about your childhood?
Well, my mother died when I was young and my father was a great influence. We were in the Victory Garden during World War II. Everybody had a garden and we were on our hands and knees and we were working on the turnips, thinning the plants. And he was telling me about how important it is for a woman to get her education. And she said, you'll probably marry and have a family, but husbands die and husbands leave, and you must be able to take care of yourself. And education was always the goal. And many ways he taught me that. And my father was born in 1886. And I don't know why he felt that way. I've given it some thought and I don't know how did a man from that period have those kind of attitudes, but that was what did it for me.
Thank you, Bee. It's a wonderful story.
Can
Yes,
I contribute?
yes, everyone.
Okay, I want to follow Bee's story because my grandmother was born about the same time your father was. And her father, who was much, much older, had 7 children and he thought education was a good thing. But he said, if it's good for the boys, it's good for the girls too. Hell, educate them all. So my grandmother finished college. Well, it was the normal school at in Utah, Logan, Utah, and was a horseback riding circuit rider teaching little children. She went from village to village to village in South Idaho. And so every woman in my family but one, going down generations, they've all gone to college because if it was good enough for the boys, it was good enough for the girls. And I don't know where Jones got that idea, but he did.
Great story.
My mother was also, well, my family, my parents were both very supportive of my doing anything I wanted. I mean, not anything I wanted, but that I could be, supported me in telling me that I could do or be whatever I wanted. And neither of them had a college education. For my mother, that was particularly sad because she graduated valedictorian of her high school and nobody ever encouraged her, even talked to her about going to college or university. So she knew that loss. And I just know from the time I can remember, there was never any question about it. It was just going to be that I was going to be going to college. It was so I would say they supported me all the way through and were obviously, as most of us, the most influential people in my life.
I would contribute about my grandmother, whom I did not know. She died before I was born, my mother's mother, as did my father's mother, so I never knew either of them. But her stories and her life lived on through stories from my mother and other members of the family. And one thing that was admirable about her was that she also lived on a farm and did all the work that farm women did, of course, but she took time for herself. She would go to Chicago for a week and spend time with friends in the city, going to museums and plays and whatever. So she treated herself well, and she belonged to many bridge clubs and to the church circle and on and on. I must admit, my mother followed in her footsteps in terms of being a joiner. I did not. AUW is one of the few things I've ever joined. But anyway, my mother also recalled that her mother gave her this piece of advice before marrying. And she told her, marry for love, but have an eye to business.
Okay.
My mother was educated and very active, but for me, impact in my life was my father. I have two sisters, and so I was the person who went fishing and did all the stuff with him. When I was very young, my father became ill with cancer. I came home from school. He'd had cancer several years. When he died, the autopsy, the doctor said it was in his brain every place. They couldn't even understand how he lived as long as he did. But I came home from school one day, and I was probably 11. And I opened the kitchen door, and I heard a sound like an animal being crushed. And it's like you've walked into something place you don't belong. You know that immediately. I went back out, shut the door, waited outside for a while, and then came in and was very loud. So I knew my father was, at home. And he called me into the bedroom, and with a big smile on his face, told me to sit down beside him and asked me how my day was, and joked and laughed with me. And I sat there the whole time knowing that he was in such excruciating pain. And it taught me the idea that you have no idea what's happening in another person's life. No matter how they present themselves, you don't know. So try to be kind. And the second thing that he did it was the week before he died. He was still at home, and he had me come down and sit to the couch beside me, and he read some things to me. He had me memorize something. And then he turned to me and he said, "Linda, always be good to your old lady." And I was just shocked. He never called my mother an old lady. He didn't talk like that. And I just looked at him and I said, "Daddy, what do you mean?" And he said, "Linda, you're going to be an old lady someday. The choices that you make will create that person, and you want to like her when you're old. So make good choices." And I've never ever forgotten that. And I think he knew he was dying soon. And I think he wanted to leave me with that last bit of, and I'm always remember that. It's impacted me all the time, my entire life.
Who else would like to share? Anna, I see you there. Hi.
I guess the same stories that you all have or are sharing is, my dad basically gave me the same advice that, get an education, because you can't always depend on a husband or a man to take care of you. So that was always the underlying advice. And I did go and get an education, and that was lucky for me, because when my husband passed away, then I was on my own. So it just made it, I was able to take care of myself and my daughter.
And now you've become our state president of the American Association of University Women. So we're all very happy about that as well. Is it Kelly? Are you still on? I had a dog.
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, hi.
Hi. Well, I guess
you know that I was raised by a strong woman. The value of education in our family it wasn't even something we didn't think we wouldn't do. And I was a difficult teenager, but my parents supported me when I wasn't ready to start college. I went to cosmetology school, and then I remember making a promise that I would be in college within 6 months. And I think I stuck to that. And I just feel grateful that I had that example. My parents, I remember my dad when I was a kid coming home, and he would work so hard, and he would come home and play with us, and it was just such an example. And I watched my brother Josh and I are 6 years apart, and we're very close friends. And he does the same thing. He comes home from work and he plays with his kids, and it's just, I've done the same thing. And so it's something, and I know my older brother has done the same thing too. And so it's just, there's so much that you do that's just so ingrained in you. And I think the older you get, you take those blessings and you hold them so dear. I had so many amazing women in my life. I had a grandmother that just influenced me so much. It was my dad's mom. And so I feel like I always knew my dad to a place, because he was very much like his mother. And then I had a great grandmother that I spent a lot of time with when I was very young. And she was a very strong woman who raised 12 children. And she just loved me so much. And she tried to teach me things in this beautiful German way with her beautiful German accent. And she was self-taught, and she would try to teach me how to do laundry with her rolling when the laundry would roll through the two, I don't even know what they're called, but my fingers would get too close, and I still hear her voice, ay, and just, and it was just having those beautiful things that I think you don't recognize until you get to be 51 years old. And I've just kind of resonated in so many gifts that I had the opportunity to be a part of. And so I call those just incredible blessings, and I feel so fortunate. And I hope that my husband and I have instilled that into our children.
Kelly is our only daughter, so I invited her to be with us today, and she's in Oregon in the school system working with students, which she calls students of varying abilities. So Kelly, I know you have to go back sooner or later, but I wanted to introduce you to so many of my friends, and I'm grateful that you could join us today.
Yeah, I do have to run. I'm going to go actually pick up some food packets so I can have 4 families so far that will have food over the weekend. So that if you notice that I'm not there, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you. And someone else had, okay, Susan Kirk, this. Thank you.
This makes me think of when I was in high school, I wanted a summer job. Many of my friends had summer jobs, and the kind of treasured job was to work. I had planned to be a teacher, and it was to work with what they called summer playgrounds, like day camp. And so I initially applied and was rejected. And they already had a full quota, they had said. And I remember opining to my father and complaining, and he said, well, you just don't leave it there. You keep going, go back. So I went, and every day I rode on my bike and bothered these people in the office. Any openings yet? And finally they gave me the job, and I think it was just to get rid of me because I was such a nuisance. But I learned to persevere and not give up. And so that's a lesson I learned from my dad.
I sometimes think we only grow in the struggle, don't we? That helps us grow at least. Linda, you have something to share with us.
Yes, I could reiterate what so many people have said about loving parents who prized education and encouraged that. My mother did not have a formal education. She led a very difficult life with her father dying young, excuse me, and being passed around to relatives. But she read greatly, and everybody thought she had a degree, and she never corrected them. There was no need to. She encouraged me a great deal. My father's mother was really a very good friend, as your daughter had mentioned. And not only was education important to her and family, but her faith in the Lord. And from her, I grew a lot of great strength, because I remember seeing her read her Bible every morning and pray every morning. And that's a habit that I've continued doing, and it's just a good way to start the day. And I add coffee to my little readings in the morning. She didn't. But I'm very grateful for the Christian faith that has helped me to endure, especially these last months when we've been so isolated from each other, because we are relational and we've all missed each other so much.
Thank you, Linda. Is there anyone else who wants to tell us? Karen Luke, I know you've got all kinds of things to say. You're up there in the corner. Can you give us a little insight?
Well, I would say the one person that really influenced me was a school teacher I had in 2nd grade. And she took me aside and she said, I want you to know those children don't define you. You need to define yourself. And she worked with me about having self-confidence to stand up to be who I thought I should be. And it was really an amazing lesson for somebody who was a school teacher. And that that really has stuck with me.
I think teachers have made a major, whether it was elementary, junior, senior high, or through college, educators have made a major influence on all of our lives in so many ways, haven't they? I had an English teacher tell me in high school that one of the best that's ever happened to her was to get a letter from a student who had graduated 20 years and had contacted her, wrote her a letter and said, "My English proficiency is because of you, Mrs. Murphy." And I thought that's what happens when we teach. We get those kinds of accolades from students. And I've been so grateful for the teacher that I had in a one-room schoolhouse, a woman who just really taught us that reading is so important for the rest of your life. And we had great books, even in a one-room schoolhouse. So, Claudia, you're there too. Do you have anything you want to share with us?
Well, I have been listening to all these stories, and I have kind of the same sort of thing. My grandfather was a doctor, and he encouraged his children, my mother's family, all to get education. He had 5 children, and my mother, who became a teacher, and this was during the Depression. And at that time, some people said, well, she has a father that can support her. They should give the job to somebody who doesn't have that, because it was a Depression. And he said, she's educated, she's able to do this, and she shouldn't listen to that. And so she went, and she was a math teacher, and she taught for 7 years before she got married. And my father was also a doctor, and they always encouraged us. I have 2 sisters, and they all encouraged us to go to college. And it was never a question of if we would go, it was just, that we would. And so I've always brought that with me forward.
Thank you. Libby, are you still with us?
Me? I am.
Yes, I'm here. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Linda or Libby?
Hi, Libby is there too. Libby and Linda, please share if you feel comfortable.
Okay. My mother, like many others, both my parents were very strong believers in a liberal arts education. My father was highly educated. My mother did go through high school, and of course taught me the lesson that whatever you do in life, make sure that you can support yourself. But my mother was also a very subservient wife, and that had a very profound impact on me, because I did not want to be a subservient woman in any role. And I think that has served me well at times, and at other times not so much. But I was also extremely influenced by the women's movement and Gloria Steinem. And I did meet her in person in a very small meeting. I think there were 10 or 12 of us in a conference room, and we all had lunch together. And when we got up to say goodbye to her and thank her for coming, honest to goodness, this is so sappy on my part, but I started to tear up. And all I could say to her was thank you, because I really learned so much from her. When I've listened to her and read what she has had to say, has helped me a great deal in my life. That's it.
What year was that, Linda, or Libby, when you?
Oh gosh, you'd have to ask. Late 80s, early 90s, something like that.
Yeah, well, she's been an important woman in all of our lives, certainly in the feminist movement. Linda Laird, thanks, Libby. Linda Laird, you had something also?
Yeah, I was going to tell you that my grandparents, my grandmother probably, because she was the strong one in the family. I had very little my grandfather didn't talk much to me, but my grandmother always mentored me and took care of me. And when they died, when I was 8 years old, they left me money to go to college. And it impressed me so that someone would actually set money aside for my education. And my mother saw to it that that money was never touched, no matter how poor we were and how little we had to eat. And it was there. And it took me 19 years to get through college, but I eventually made it. And she came to the U of A for my graduation. And that was a special time for her. But I think the person who really influenced me most was the librarian. When I was in second grade, we had a library that was very tiny, but the librarian determined that I could read any book in the entire library. So I read them all. And by the time I went to middle school, I read a book a day all the way through high school. And I still have a tendency to read a book a day. I even read while I brush my teeth. I read magazines. So I think that librarian was onto something and had the most influence of all.
Speaking of books, and I know Linda has read many of them, books, and she's still challenging us to read now on the Holocaust, and then we'll be reading genocide books. But I want to tell all of you that if any of you want to borrow a book from my bookshelf, I have many of Gloria Steinem, many of the women's movement, many of things that happened since Title IX. We could not have had International Women's Day or Women's Studies without Title IX. So we have to thank the people who worked hard for that passage so women could finally not only participate in sports, but that we could become people who could educate our own women who had never in any other place other than after 1976 would we concentrate on women's history, which we called women's herstory, because there wasn't a lot being taught about women. So if you want to borrow any book during this month, please let me know. I'll deliver it to your home or however you want to get it. But I've got all kinds of books I would love to lend to anyone who wants to read any some books written by women for women and about women. Is there anyone else who wants to share? Yes, I see you there.
Let's contribute to the National Women's History Museum. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Now you're on mute.
How many of us contribute to the National Women's History Museum?
I'm a charter member.
I am too. And now we have a spot in the Smithsonian system.
That's right.
That's right.
Thank you for that. Phyllis, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, my upbringing was like everybody else's. My parents expected me to go to university, although in Canada it was much harder to get in, but the expectation was there. Part of that might have been my mother. Her father was a widowed minister. The two daughters, she was the one that was expected to take care of dad in his dotage. Her only concession was after grade 12, she got to study piano in Regina for a year. After my brother died, my mother was so depressed. She ended up working in a department store. Then she became proofreader of the local newspaper. And 2 years later, she became the women's editor. This was a newspaper in a city of about 50,000 people. It's pretty impressive.
Very much, yes.
Absolutely. Penny, do you have anything to tell us today? How are you feeling after your shot yesterday?
I'm surviving just fine, I think. I guess my background's a little different. My parents were immigrants from Europe, and I'm the first person in the family to have graduated from high school, let alone college. And they were not particularly supportive of a woman going to college. There was not a lot of money, so the money was kept for my two brothers. But I was very fortunate to have very supportive teachers who helped me get scholarships, who gave me some jobs during the summer. once in a medical laboratory. And without them, I probably would have never got through college. So I appreciate educators so much.
Thank you, Henny. Yeah, we have a lot of people to thank, haven't we? Is there anyone else who wants to say something before we go on with the rest of our program?
I would like to say something. I'm just sitting here and listening to everybody. And everybody is talking about someone that influenced or encouraged them. And I wonder if we need to remember that every day. Every single person we meet, whether it's grocery store or whatever, we have the opportunity to be those people that we are so thankful to. We can be them ourselves. And I think it's so easy for us to forget that. And I just was thinking about that when I was listening to what everybody was talking about and what everybody said.
We have not spoken about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor. And have you read the book Sisters-in-Law, Two Women Who Changed the World? I bought it, but I donated it to our La Vista library here at La Posada. And I noticed it wasn't on the shelf. She said, when they don't read it, I contribute it to the Conrad Joyner. So that book is in the stacks there at Conrad Joyner, if you want to read it.
Well, thanks for naming, yes, those two women. And certainly we all remember Ruth and all she did on our behalf, fought for equal rights constantly. Equity, it was her top priority as she was serving. And I still think she's influencing, hopefully, our legislators today with her values. Thanks, Dorothy, for remembering Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Yes, she was an important person in all of our lives. Gail, did you want to say anything? Gail Garrison? Okay, well, we'll continue on. I am so appreciative of today, and I think as we go through this month, we're only into the 4th day of March. Let us look at all the people who have made our life better, and I'm glad Linda articulated that when we do see people, especially now with COVID, it hasn't been an easy time, has it? And I think that's why they chose this theme this year, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in the COVID-19 World, and helping us to try to celebrate all the women and girls who have shaped a more equitable future. And hopefully, as we are trying to do now in AUW, create a more inclusive world as well. I believe we're all a part of the global community, and this is one day out of the entire world where women of the world celebrate one theme together around the world. So we want to remember that. It actually happens on Sunday. And of course, with the time changes, it'll be happening Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. But we're a little earlier than the rest, but we're Zooming so much, I thought we should bring that into Exploring Women's Culture today. We're going to close with the theme song has always been during International Women's Day, and it's transcribed in many languages throughout the world, but it's Helen Reddy's song, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. And after Helen Reddy sings, we have a wonderful poem written by Judy Chicago that will be recited by Karen Louie. I just want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for today and say, let's celebrate one another. We can't be together, but we are together. And let's celebrate the women and men of the world who have made our lives and the world a better place.
Just an aside, if anybody ever wants to see Judy Chicago's place settings, you know, the table she lays, it's in the museum in Brooklyn. I think it's 48, I forget how many place settings that she invented and drew and painted the plates and embroidered the mats that lay under them. And I have postcards of beautiful color reproductions of every one of those place settings from when I visited the museum. if you ever have need for Judy Chicago's tables.
Oh, that would be wonderful to see, Bee. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna listen to,
Can faintly hear something in the background, but that's it.
they can. You could not hear her?
No.
Oh, I'm so
Sorry.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I had it on as loud as I could take it and it just didn't come through to you. So I'm very sorry. She's singing I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar. You know the song. So that is the theme song. And I have it taped, but it just doesn't come across for, none of you heard her at all then, correct?
No, she's not roaring today.
Faint in the background, that's all.
Sorry. All right, so then we will close this day thinking of I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar as Karen Louie recites the poem of Judy Chicago, The Merger.
And all that divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind. And then both men and women will be gentle, excuse me, and then both women and men will be strong. And then no person will be subject to another person's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied. And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance. And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old. And then all will nourish the young. And then all will cherish life's creatures. And then all will live in harmony with one another and the earth. And that everywhere will be called Eden once again.
Keep celebrating you, dear friends. Happy International Women's Day and Herstory Women's Month.
Thank you, Sharon. for
Thank
setting
you
this
so
up.